Buenos días a todos. Muchas
Good
gracias.
morning, everyone. Thank you for participating in this new Ask Me Anything. On this occasion, we are going to be talking about DevOps, Team Dev, the versioning and continuous integration. The dynamics would be as follows. Jose Lamas is the product manager of GeneXus. He'll be making a presentation first about this topic, and then we're going to have room for questions and answers. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Jose Lamas. Something else, this webinar has simultaneous interpretation into English. If you want to listen to the English version, click on the interpretation icon and choose the language. Thank you. Thank you, Aníbal. Welcome all. The idea of these sessions is to be able to talk about items related to the development process and operations that we develop with GeneXus. This is something that involves many things, many technologies, and we are quite a few in this panel. They're here with us to talk with you and answer questions. We have Oscar, Jorge. When I said Jorge, someone was asking me, who is Jorge? Well, you have him here. Federico, Silvia, Alejandra, Antonella. The team is becoming larger and larger. And we are here to answer any questions that you may have. I said that the idea here is to discuss about these topics in particular, but we've discussed these same topics on other occasions, other sessions that are available already. There are several talks that are very much related to this topic, but I would particularly like to highlight these by Rodrigo, talking about software version and in team-based development, or Alejandra's how to automate, deploy, Mariana's about software testing approaches with GeneXus, and Sabrina's talk deploying GeneXus applications for different architectures and so on. So I was saying that all these talks are going deeper into those topics, but the idea of this session is to integrate all that, to be able to talk and discuss and have a Q&A session. And just to give you a broader context that could be the basis for questions and comments, let me go very briefly over the topics we've been discussing and we've been working on. Versioning is one, and team collaboration are the core of GeneXus Server. In particular, this is something that we are working on continuously, accompanying GeneXus evolution and supporting everything new, objects, and in the past short time in connection with GeneXus Web, so that GeneXus Web has its own way of connecting and operating with GeneXus Server. Testing is something else we've been working very hard on, and integration with all these things, and particularly the latest text versions integrated in the operations of GeneXus IDE and the operations with GeneXus Server, and also the integration of testing with IDE processes. We are working quite a lot on deploy technology, supporting multiple technologies, how to package binaries, how to distribute binary processes, support the product platform services, and all that with more and more sophisticated architectures. All this must be in a continuous integration, constant operation, let's say. And we've traditionally worked on three layers. The first one is what we consider integration from the outside, technologies and products related to continuous integration that could be connected to products and processes related to GeneXus. For example, the plugins we've created for controls in Jenkins to know and be able to operate with GeneXus projects. And recently, we've introduced GeneXus Server to have certain processes that other tools may record how those events are taking place, etc. The second layer is what we call an inside integration. This is our products to other tools. The most important thing there is what we've done with the integration with Jenkins and version 17 with GeneXus Server. It's very easy then to create an environment integrated to GeneXus Server Jenkins, and with the GX Server console, you can see and define and operate with automated processes with Jenkins, and everything related to security, scanning that is integrated in the IDE, what we mentioned regarding deploy as well. And the highest layer is what we've defined as the vision of GeneXus platform. That's what we want to get to. That's what we are working hard on, to give you a unified access and vision to everything that has to do with development, process, integration, deploy, and systems in an integrated interface to manage all that. So, well, as I said at the beginning, this is an overview of the context, so that the topics that we can discuss on are there on the table. We are open then to any questions that you may have, any comments, any concerns that you may have. So as usual, we look for the courageous who would like to start asking questions.
Creo que para arrancar ustedes tenían una pregunta.
I think that you had a question, Jose, to kick off. Yes. A question that I'm always interested in, particularly regarding testing, but continuous integration as well, is how much you have advanced with this. Because sometimes I have the feeling that it's like, you know, doing exercise, you know, like going on a diet. I mean, we all agree we have to do it, but sometimes we take some time to start. And so the question is there anyone here in particular who hasn't started yet and who can give us an idea why? What is it? Why is it difficult? Or what are your questions?
Para responderle a José, pueden habilitar el micrófono.
To answer Jose, you can open your microphone so that we can hear you. The chat has some questions as well. I think there is a question in the chat. It's Hernan Dominguez, and he says, how do you see the integrations coming with other suppliers, such as Azure DevOps, for example?
Azure DevOps, entiendo que...
Well, Azure DevOps, I think the question is Azure DevOps as another integration and as another driver. Those three layers I've mentioned, integration with other drivers, well, everything we do in GeneXus and all the operations related to GeneXus server, everything related to deploy and testing, we are very much involved in executing everything outside the IDE. That is, that it could be executed through a command line. And in particular, we want to integrate it so that it can not only be executed as isolated command, but more other commands that are more integrated with dependencies. So all the operations that involve this can be executed from the outside and can be programmed as well. Now, from that standpoint, they can be integrated into any trigger, into any driver triggering processes, because in any of those drivers, any mechanism, to write the calls to these actions that can be executed through a command line or a script. Now, there is a next level of integration, which is the possibility for these drivers to see some of our tools as specific citizens, and all those drivers are repositories. And whenever you're going to define a process in this engines, you say, well, I'm using a repository of a certain type with certain credentials, URL, etc. And in general, you have the types of repositories, which are the industry standards, CDN, etc., to develop in traditional languages. So what we've done in particular for Jenkins and for the others is to have plugins, that is extensions to those engines, so that they recognize the GeneXus service as one more. You can do it without it, but if you do it with it, it's easier. So you have the user interface in a direct manner. In the same way, we've done it for use controls and Jenkins. Those integrations are in open source. That can also be done for any other engine. The question was for Azure DevOps, but it could be done for others. It's not very complicated.
Por ahí a Rodrigo Castro.
Rodrigo Castro is there, who was raising his hand. Rodrigo. Hello. Well, the answer has been, the question has been answered, is how to make integrations, and so that there are more business rules, more environments, for development. Any changes, developers will integrate them at the right time, perhaps going through certain tests, and in the next environment, integration environment would be, grouping the changes, and then things become complicated. Would it be possible to do it with Jenkins at present? But you've answered it as well in functions with SSBO. And my other question is about, is there any way to update the database? If you have to reorganize through scripts, instead of doing it with GeneXus directly through permits, I mean, could it be done through scripts, through SQL scripts, with this type of continuous integration with some kind of integrated tool? Well, yes. This can be packaged, and they can be distributed and executed. And that process, there are tasks in that can be done. There are two ways. The standard mode is packaging the organization that is executed with GeneXus. I mean, the same organization that you do with the, and it could have an SQL, but there could be other processes, for the, I don't know, changes of data, processing data, moving data from one table to the other, etc. They're not always executed using SQL. There are other mechanisms as well to create the reorganization and packaging it as a SQL script, with the restriction that sometimes that doesn't include the processes that may be included in the standard organization. But yes, there are ways to automate that organization or creation of the database. Thank you. Jorge Izquierdo is raising his hand. Jorge, hello. About a couple of years ago, a little bit more, I was looking into Verco, and we made an analysis, and we transferred it to Sylvia. We share it with her. And I was looking at the initial presentation of the event of Live 2021. I could see that there was an integration for, SecOps, DevOps with Veracode. And I would like to know what you're offering at present for the static analysis. On the one hand, we used to have a report that Veracode would give us, and where we had all the failures in between inverted commas that Veracode would find. And if I run Veracode from the outside, am I going to have the same type of report, or are those things already overcome? Thank you. Who would like to answer that question? Sylvia, perhaps? I see you're smiling, so perhaps, well, it's simply because Jorge mentioned my name. All right, good afternoon. As Jorge said, some time ago, we worked with him and a client going over a document that was the coming out from the Veracode analysis of the application of a client. Of course, those reports as such given by the tool, well, you have to make a previous analysis, and that previous analysis is made by a security team checking really that the errors, they're not errors in fact, but they're incidents that the tool identifies. And the first thing you have to do, in fact, is a detailed analysis to see which one of them are failures or errors, and how to vulnerate the application. Most of those cases are false positives in those reports, and that requires a detailed analysis before going over them. Then on the other hand, as you say, Jorge, from a short time now, we have an agreement with Veracode, and the idea is to run the tool, to do it ourselves in order to determine what failures there are, which are those failures, and doing it before our clients find them. So the idea is to reduce those mistakes that may occur in the applications. Of course, if we detect, going back to the questions of clients in general, once that analysis has been seen and reviewed by a security team, and we have sent that information as to how to reduce the vulnerability, the app, and so on. Of course, those are priority incidents in order to correct them, of course. Now, the analysis that we made of Veracode is on the GeneXus source, basically, but clients will make their analysis on the final application. So obviously there are going to, or there may be differences. But of course, well, the idea is to continue working on it and improve the tool more and more. All right, thank you. You're welcome. We've got a question from Felipe Neves, who is asking, in a deployment process, it will among many, is it good to have a Jenkins tool to download the packages in a centralized repository? Well, is he referring to distributed from the bid process, or the destination, that is what's generated, the packaging is distributed in different machines or environment? And anyway, let me answer for the two. Jenkins in particular is an execution engine, and it allows you to have a master state architecture where you can have a Jenkins, which is the master, and where all integration processes are defined, and it's in turn connected to multiple Jenkins installations in machines such as slaves, among which the load is distributed. So you can do something in some machines and other things in other machines, and they can have a parallel intervention. But you can also distribute parallel all those functions and define even a machine with different capacities. For some task, I would need a machine with Windows, with certain things installed and certain versions. And for other things, I may have Linux and doing other things, and you can do it with all that. But all that is related to these processes. Now, the question of distributing the binaries that are packaged on the basis, as from those processes, is done through the standard mechanisms of distribution. So if you're using a platform as a service, you would be using the mechanisms, the tools of command lines, of services, of each one of those platforms to deploy to any machine. In platforms, you make deploy, and then you ask the platform to replicate that to the different machines. And it's the platform that is in charge of that, or it could be processes used on other types of technologies. And in that case, the distribution is done that way. Everything is automated, of course, with actions through command lines, but based on those technologies. Thank you. He was also talking about a package where there is a main server distributed to other servers. Yes, that was the part. That was the second option. Yes. But I also mentioned the other thing, just in case someone else was interested in. Eduardo Santana is asking because he would like to know if there is any documentation of integration with Azure DevOps and GeneXus. I'm not sure if there is something specific with DevOps, Azure DevOps, but what I was saying is that it's the basis that you can use for automation of any engine, actions through command lines. But anyway, you can contact us through the support channel. There is also a forum of Build and Deploy, where there's lots of movements, and we are not only have the chance of answering, but there are many other people who can answer. So we could probably get in touch through that channel. Very well. Carlos Lupini says, for me, GAM should always produce scripts of the permits for new programs that are created. At present, that is a problem, because you have to run it to run it in over 80 database to generate permits.
¿Alguien dice yo?
Has anybody raised their hand? Well, I'd like to be interested in how you do the updating now. Do you use the app of Play tool, which is the tool that we've distributed with GeneXus, or whether you're trying to adapt it from the IDE of GeneXus? So how do you update it? How do you update the permits?
Tengo permiso para meterme en eso.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in? Just a second. This is a clarification. Our clients do not allow us to use GAM deploy tool. That's exactly what I wanted to say. They don't allow you to run an exit, not even through a command line. No, an exit, an administrator doesn't allow you to use a table that changes permits if it doesn't do that. They want to see a script so that they can know what it does, and so that they can see it and version it and so on. Well, I simply wanted to say that as regards the script of GAM is just, it's true that that's missing, to have a more detailed, with flow, something happens that is similar. There are some sentences that are asking us for the script and we haven't available. It's pending. It's in our radar. We haven't implemented it yet, but I know that we are working on it. So perhaps I'm going to write it down anyway. And let's hope that we can make it available soon. And the answer for Federico's question is you run it on our own base and you give it to WA so that it makes the magic. It works the magic to be able to synchronize it. Yes, as Silvia said, those are things that we've been working on also with the GAM team. And those are things that are on our radar. There are some operations, whereas the normal the build is done with the operating database as a prototype, and then you have to carry out a process, as in this case, you have a database. And that's something that we are researching and developing. But our idea is focused on formalizing these things as a process to generate the script or the processes that will make that updating of permits and the flow as well. I think it does that permit. And, the idea is to isolate the process that is going to be executed and that then it is executed on the basis of an operating database. And so from that standpoint, it would be similar to script, to package the script or to package the script of flow and then make the distribution and the replication of that on the basis of data, not on the basis of the data, but data on that basis. That's the line we're focusing on. Thank you. I've got one further question from Felipe. How can we make a deploy on a KB, thinking of architecture of microservices? I think that Sabrina's talk deals with that. I understand that that's one of the targets available. When you look at the IDE and you ask for make a deploy application, one of the possible types of targets packaging is for microservices. I think it was for Azure and for Amazon. We have Azure functions, and I think we also have a Lander. And that type of deploy, we've already had comments that there are things that are, too much, and we're trying to fine tune it so that we don't send so many things that shouldn't be sent. But we do have that kind of deploy in GeneXus. Yes, and in fact, not long ago, we mentioned something that we are working on, trying to solve. I think that Enrique Almeida had been working on it, the question of the properties and functions. Yes, it could include more than one function. Yes, it's on our radar and we're working on it. Very well. Can I? We've got a question before you, Jorge. Hello. Here we like this feature of having in the IDE the option to generate pipelines of a KB, for instance. But there are two things that are missing to have this feature 100% usable. One thing is that we can only make a deploy to the cloud at present, and that's not our reality from here. We need to configure deploys for Azure, for Amazon. And so I don't know if there could be a possibility to configure from the server console, or, but not only deploy to cloud, but to make deploys to other things. And the second point is that since we have many KBs, it's a problem to create base pipelines for each one of them. And we are doing this at present by managing scripts of pipelines where we have to put properties of managing the credentials of the database user, keyword, and password. And because of security reasons, I don't I don't think I don't know if you're going to open up those possibilities that we could do everything from the IDE and also configure script pipelines or something like that. I don't know if it's clear what I've said. Yes. The answer is yes. Let's see. Your question is clear. And if we want to do something about it, the answer is yes as well. Now, two things there. The first one about pipelines, not only to the cloud. Well, there are two parts there. We want to, that's the basic implementation, because that was the basic mechanism, a standard mechanism to do what we do with GeneXus, and it was easy to do. But our target is to be able to model in GeneXus other types of deploys in the same way you model in your environment, Java, Tomcat, that you can model certain environment and that deploy is using certain things associated to different targets and so on. And that allows you to say, well, I want to automate a pipeline, and you can do it, right? That would be the road, the ideal path. Now, in the meantime, we can do it on the side, and that's why we are interested in putting into work all the other things, because once you have what you have in GeneXus is to create a pipeline very quickly associated to a certain release. But now, once you've created it, in Jenkins, what you've got is a pipeline, and that pipeline can be changed. And if you modify it, of course, it's at a lower level than doing it with IDE of GeneXus, but there is a possibility of making this packaging on the basis of units and pointing to different types of architectures or platform services and so on. All that can be done at present, but you have to modify manually those pipelines. Now, the other part of your question goes along the same line, at least for the time being, and particularly for managing credentials in Jenkins. What you do is you classify it in Jenkins, and then the scripts you make reference to them, so that you don't have a plain text of the credentials in your script. But then on the other hand, it's much easier to use because the IDE of credentials that are going to be used, you copy it in a project, in installation, and in a script. It's very easy to do it with a variable, with the IDE that you do it with more credentials. And in fact, in the standard pipelines that we use in that basic integration of B17 of GeneXus server, the access credentials to XQ server and SQL access credentials are managed in that way. You record it first, you catalog in Jenkins. Jenkins stores them in a secure manner, and in the scripts you make reference to them. Thank you. And now we have Jorge Izquierdo. Yes, Jorge, come on. In order to make our clients start using continuous integration, one of the things that I was asking at a certain point in time and hadn't been solved, I think that Ursula told me about it. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the AMA of testing. I don't know if you can also now which tests I'm interested in executing. You may have 20 tests, but you only want to run the first 4 in this pipeline or whatever. Well, yes, there are 2 lines there. On the one hand, what's called a switch test, a group of tests, which is a way of referencing a group with one name, and that you can change the content. I don't recall whether that's already included in the latest upgrades or is about to come out. But anyway, in the automated execution in the pipeline or SDE or and the task making the test, if you don't indicate anything, it would execute all of them. But you have the possibility of having a file specifying which tests you want to run in there. You can choose, the SDE, any. And you simply put those files up parameters and simply personalize your script. Is that something recent? No, my understanding is that it's been there for some time, but perhaps it's not easily seen, but it's there. The task where you write, one of the parameters is the list. Yeah, well, perhaps you can send us the link. Okay, yeah. Well, the test suite is as from let me put in the chat the link of all these documents, so you have it.
Okay. Dennis pregunta, José, perdona.
Dennis, José, excuse me, the credentials in the scripts building settings. Excuse me, the credentials that we've got at present, what is it that we're doing now? In the machine where we have Jenkins, we create folders for each one of the knowledge base. And under that, we have basically 2 files. I think one is the BuildOnly Settings, and the other one is the one that we don't use. Now here we have the credentials in this file, from the IDE. It's very easy to start a new pipeline. And in this way, we take these credentials so that right from the beginning, we can set up the knowledge base and start. Something else that is burdensome is that when we create a new pipeline, in 100% of all cases, we have to open the knowledge base and do it through GeneXus to include the database of the credentials at least once, close it, and then it works fine. So you can't do it right from the beginning. It never works well right from the beginning. I don't know if you've mapped it in that way, or do you know anything about that? Well, we've seen that difficulty. There are some things that GeneXus saves in the machine because of the user context. And when it's the first time, you have to do it. Yeah. Yes, Jose, something here. That file in the BuildOnly settings is setting some properties and from the KB, particularly the properties to connect to the database. That's part of what you can save by using this BuildOnly settings. But you have a plain text credentials in that file, and that's part of the things that are missing. We have to model that and managing the properties linked to the KB that is being done with user integration. And deploy to cloud or build only, and then on that basis you can make an array of properties to be able to set connections in the database and so on. But the restriction is that they are in a file. That's part of the things then that we have to evolve and improve. Yes, if there is a way to change that, to deploy to cloud for build-only settings for my architecture, it would be a good solution. I don't know if there is a possibility of managing that file to change to an Amazon or a local deploy or something like that. Or if it's only done for the GeneXus cloud. Well, the two things. It is thought to cover those cases, and particularly when we wrote that script, we thought it on the basis of those two options, and then to solve it, to solve the fact that one same script could be used for the two cases. We separated some things, and in that settings file that is included from the main, and it's used for that case. Now, it's still a script and can be changed, and so you could include other things. And there, what we've done in the deploy to settings is, if I'm not mistaken, we put the main script that is waiting for those setting files to cover certain properties and values, and it runs them. Now, in your case, that's not good because those credentials would be in that way, but nothing prevents you from writing something on the main script or on other script that can be connected to the main script that can have access to certain credentials catalogs by Jenkins, and then on that basis obtain value property and runtime that can be used for to set the properties. Right? Is it clear? You can do it. Of course, it's not done in what we've distributed. You would have to do it in that way. Anyway, the other thing is a problem. You were asking if that was always happening at the beginning, and Oscar was saying that it did. This is something that it's on our radar, and those are things that we have to look into to simplify it. Now, what happens is that when we started with a new pipeline, we have to open the database once, and then carry on and so on. Yes, and that also forces you to depend on the new Jenkins services being used by the same user and make a build and make it interactive with the machine, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do it. And that's not ideal either. But it's one of the problems we've identified, yes. And Aníbal, there is another question there on the chat. If you want me, I can comment on it. Yes, I've got it. Looking at the continuous integration scenario, it's recommendable. Is it good to have several branches of development in one KB? Silvia, would you like to answer that? Or Alejandra, perhaps? Well, in fact, that will depend of the environments you'll have to manage in your KB. In your KB, define different versions. In this case, will depend on how the application evolves in each case. It's not only that we have documents in our wiki of different methodologies and ways of managing the KB versions according to how you work and how you make the releases and so on. So obviously that's going to depend on each situation. It's not that there is a rule, exact rule for each case, for all cases. Well, it is true that once you have continuous integration, it's an incentive to use those methodologies because things will be easier. Of course, yes, you can define the pipelines depending on the versions that you'd like to test at that time, at a certain point in time. And so, for instance, the test version, you will probably like to have a pipeline, execute a pipeline every day, or the Q&A to make sure that that version is deployable continuously. And so it's going to be used. It's going to be useful so that on top of that, you can define the processes for continuous integration in a better manner. Now, there are things that were always convenient, from the methodological standpoint, but that sometimes, it would mean an extra workload, to have different environments and set it up. But once you automate it, then it's much easier to do it in that way now. So branches to do and what scripts to run, of course, that depends specifically on methodology, but we use a mechanism of a development branch and a stable branch. And internally, we have, for development, we have an integration that is continuous. Whenever there is a change, it's set up and supervised, and it becomes available in a version of GeneXus. And we have the same for stable. And as Sylvia said, once a day. Apart from that, sets up. It can set up other platforms or products and can package a setup. It would upload it, it publish, it sends mails. There are others that execute tests every day or once a week or. Any other questions? Any other questions to be made? Anyone from our team wishing to make a comment? Perhaps we can make a comment on the next release of a workshop. We are setting it up in order to provide support to all the installation of an environment and to make the execution test of a pipeline in your own environment. That workshop is under process, and we'll tell you about it once it's finished and complete. Very well. Mm-hmm. All right, good. There's a question. Is it advisable to have a generic KB to test it, to test other KBs? I don't understand your question, Felipe. Could you expand on it and clarify it?
Hoy tenemos una única KB para test unitario.
At present, we only have one KB for UI test to store tests that we make on other KBs. That's what they would like to have. A single KB to store all the KBs they want to test. Well, I'm not sure I understand the scenario fully, but part of the advantage of the UI tests at present is that they are integrated on the knowledge base itself. And so when you write a test, you have all the power or GeneXus power to distribute it and to write it in the same way you would do it with a procedure. And so you can make calls to other objects, you can access database, provide service, whatever. Now, if you take that up to another KB, okay, he's saying interface tests. Well, yes, the same. If they are tests of user interface and or black box tests, when it's just the same, if it's executed, if it's executing a test on KB or in GeneXus or on any other methodology, well, in theory, you could do it on any knowledge base, because if I'm using a black box, I'm restricting to the web interface, and but I'm not sure whether it would be advantageous to do it on on GeneXus, because because what you lose there is that since you have no relation with objects on a KB, you lose everything related to the high level. I can't reference a panel client, but I have to reference a panel with a certain roadmap URL and so on. And if it changes to is based on the URL and not on the client panel, and likewise it references a certain control or a procedure or whatever, and you would lose it. In theory, it can be done. In practice, I think that if I'm going to do it fully black box and tied up to HTML, I'm not sure that it's good, because you're missing all the rest, because you're writing everything, have all the reference controls and so on. Felipe, right, is saying that that's exactly what he was expecting as an answer. Yes, good.
A ver, tengo una acá de Adrián Denis.
I've got a question here from Adrián Denis. In case of a module repository with Nexus OSS, do you have plans, or in the roadmap you can move on as regards dependency, or not allowing to install a module if there is not a previous one, and so on? Yes, well, there on the roadmap, we'll continue working. You know, when you package GeneXus module, you have to declare very well what the dependencies to other modules are, the restrictions of versions among those dependencies that must have certain ranges, not lower than such and such, and not going beyond a certain version. And the moment I'm going to install a module, I should check that the dependencies are installed, and if they're not installed, it should give me the possibilities to do so. Very well. We've got enough time for one more question.
Ahí Carlos Lucchini nos dice.
Carlos Lucchini says, please, to conclude, please create a control to warn you to open a KB with a different build. I agree. I fully agree with you. Yes, that's what we have to do. Yeah. Yes, we have some indications of improvement to avoid accidents, you know, to open it with a different build. It's difficult to go back. Yes, it's pending. We have some ideas there, and the thing is to implement them. The next upgrades, we hope we'll have some good news about it. Thank you. All right, time has flown. Thank you for participating. Time's up until mid-December. We'll have AMAs every Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the past ones, as Enrique said, it's recorded on www.genexus/webinars, and you can see them again. See you then. Thank you for participating. Goodbye. Bye-bye.